to conduct the autopsies, after which the bodies were transported to what is now Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. C. The bluish-purplish wreckage that looked like the bottom of a canoe in the rear of the ambulance were escape pods from a flying saucer flown by the aliens that crashed in the Roswell area. D. Dennis was forcibly removed from the hospital and threatened with death by the red-headed officer because he had witnessed some of these activities. E. The nurse was kidnapped, possibly murdered, and all records that she ever existed were systematically destroyed by government agents, also because she witnessed these activities. As in other accounts examined in this report, the episodes described here became part of the Roswell incident only because the witness claimed they occurred at a very specific time, July 7 to 9, 1947. These dates coincide with an actual event, the retrieval of experimental Project Mogul research equipment that was erroneously reported as a flying disc. See Section 1. If the events described here occurred at any other time, years, months, weeks, or even days before or after July 7 to 9, 1947, they may be considered unusual to an uninformed person, but certainly not part of the Roswell incident. Air Force research revealed that the witness made serious errors in his recollections of events. When his account was compared with official records of the actual events he is believed to have described, extensive inaccuracies were indicated, including a likely error in the date by as much as 12 years. 2.1. The missing nurse and the pediatrician. To illustrate the errors in this account and to identify actual events, the following section will examine the accounts of the missing nurse and the unidentified pediatrician. Both of these persons were allegedly present at the Roswell Army Airfield Hospital when the events described by the witness occurred. The missing nurse. Dennis recalled that the nurse was quickly and suspiciously shipped out either the same day or the day after he met with her in the Roswell Army Air Force Officers Club. If this allegation was true, it certainly seemed unusual and verifiable. Therefore, the morning reports, the certified daily personnel accounting records required to be kept by all Army Air Forces units at that time, were obtained and reviewed. These reports did not indicate that a nurse or any other person was reassigned on the days alleged, July 8 or July 9, 1947. The morning reports of the 427th Army Air Forces Base Unit, AAFBU, Squadron M, the unit that all medical personnel at Roswell Army Airfield were assigned in July 1947, did not indicate a sudden or overseas transfer of a nurse. Stated that one nurse was reassigned on July 23, 1947, over 2 weeks after the purported events described by Dennis. That nurse was transferred by normal personnel rotation procedures to Fort Worth Army Airfield, now Carswell Air Force Base, Texas, where she remained on active duty until March 1949. In fact, the Squadron M morning reports revealed the strength of the Army Nurse Corps, ANC, at Roswell Army Airfield for July 1947 was only 5 nurses. Of these 5 nurses, none were transferred overseas or killed in a plane crash, the rumored fate of the missing nurse. This review of the hospital morning reports also indicated that the name of the missing nurse provided by the witness was inaccurate. The witness stated in several interviews that he believed the nurse's name was Naomi Maria Self. A comprehensive search of morning reports and rosters from the Roswell Army Airfield Station Hospital indicated that no person by this name or a similar name had ever served there. This finding was supported by a search of personnel records at the National Personnel Records Center, NPRC, in St. Louis, Missouri, a part of the National Archives and Record Administration. NPRC is the depository for all U.S. military personnel records. The search at NPRC also did not find a record that a person named Naomi Maria Self had ever served in any branch of the U.S. Armed Forces. These findings were consistent with previous efforts of several pro-UFO researchers who have also attempted to locate this nurse or members of her family. They, likewise, were also unable to confirm her existence. While some UFO theorists continue to allege that this absence of records regarding a nurse by this name is a part of a conspiracy to withhold information, the most likely reason for the lack of records is that this name is inaccurate. Footnote: Interestingly, an article published in the fall 1995 edition of Omni magazine, a publication that in the past has published sensational Roswell claims, also independently accounted for all 5 of the nurses and expressed a decidedly skeptical opinion of the account of the missing nurse. End of footnote. Even though the name of the nurse is incorrect, it appears that a nurse assigned to the Roswell Army Airfield Station Hospital in 1947 may have been the basis for the claims. Eileen Mae Fanton was the only nurse of the 5 assigned to Roswell Army Airfield in July 1947 whose personal circumstances and physical attributes not only resembled those of the missing nurse but appeared to be nearly an exact match. The pediatrician. In at least 2 interviews, the witness stated that a pediatrician stationed at the hospital was involved in the events he described. When asked by an interviewer how he knew the pediatrician was involved, Dennis was quoted as replying, "I know he was involved because I saw him there." Dennis is also quoted as saying that he and the pediatrician were pretty good friends, and after the pediatrician left the military, he, the pediatrician, set up a practice in Farmington, New Mexico. "I used to go fishing all the time up north, and I visited him several times up there, and he was involved," Dennis said. "I don't remember his name. I think he is still practicing in Farmington." A review of personnel files and interviews with former members of the Roswell Army Airfield Walker Air Force Base hospital staff revealed that only one physician ever relocated to Farmington, New Mexico following his military service. The former Captain Frank B. Nordstrom served at Walker Air Force Base from June 1951 until June 1953. Records also revealed that Nordstrom was indeed a pediatrician, and while at Walker Air Force Base, served as the Chief of Pediatric Services. When Nordstrom, a resident of the small town of Aztec, New Mexico, was interviewed for this report, he stated that he did not recall ever meeting Dennis and could not recall any events that supported any of his claims. See signed sworn statement in Appendix B. Farmington, population 8,000 in 1954. Is located in the primarily rural Four Corners region of New Mexico, approximately 300 miles northwest of Roswell. According to Nordstrom, Farmington did not have a pediatrician before his arrival in 1954. From 1954 until approximately 1970, Nordstrom believes he was the only pediatrician in the area. His recollections were confirmed by a local Farmington pharmacist, Charles E. Clouthier. Clouthier also served at the Walker Air Force Base Hospital from 1955 to 1957, and following his military service returned to Farmington, his hometown, where he had lived since 1934. Clouthier has been employed by and co-owned a business, Farmington Drugs, since 1957. He is familiar with most, if not all, of the doctors who practice in Farmington and the Four Corners region of New Mexico. Clouthier's confirmation that Nordstrom was the first pediatrician to practice in the Farmington area was based on both his frequent professional contacts with local physicians and his experiences as a longtime Farmington resident. Although Nordstrom believed that he was the pediatrician described, he was at a loss to explain how Dennis gained information concerning his military and civilian employment history. In a signed sworn statement, Nordstrom stated that he did not recall ever meeting Dennis and had certainly never been visited by Dennis as he has claimed. One possible source of the information is that from approximately 1958 until approximately 1961, Dennis operated a drugstore in Aztec, New Mexico, a small town near Farmington where Nordstrom resides. Interestingly, Aztec is the location of the original crashed flying saucer story. See below. However, Nordstrom also did not recall any contact with Dennis in his capacity as a drugstore operator. Descriptions of other Air Force members. Since official records prove that none of the nurses at Roswell Army Airfield in July 1947 were missing, and the nurse and pediatrician described in this account had been identified, major discrepancies between Dennis's recollections and official records were apparent. In an effort to provide for the fullest possible accounting of these claims, even though key aspects had already been proven false, Air Force researchers sought additional information to determine if there was validity to any portion of the account. Since the witness has never provided documentation to support his claims, the only source of additional information was the numerous interviews he had previously provided to private researchers and the media. His many statements, magazines, movies, books, lectures, journals, and television programs were reviewed for information that might further explain his testimony. Examination of this large body of publicly available information immediately provided clues that the witness may have recalled incidents from a period other than July 1947. The first clue was that he repeatedly, in all of the interviews, referred to the injured military person he allegedly transported to the Roswell Army Airfield Hospital as an airman. The rank of airman was not in existence in 1947. It was implemented on April 1, 1952. Prior to that date, an airman in the Air Force was referred to by the U.S. Army equivalent, a private. Another possible indication that he recalled events from a different time was the description of an alleged black sergeant that accompanied the red-headed officer at the hospital. The pairing of a white officer with a black NCO seemed unlikely since in 1947 the U.S. Army Air Forces was racially segregated, as were all branches of the armed forces. The U.S. Air Force did not begin racial integration until the May 11, 1949 issuance of Air Force Letter 35-3 that formally ended segregation. Though it was not impossible in 1947 for a black NCO to accompany and seem to be working with a white officer, it would be unlikely. These two discrepancies did not provide a firm time frame of actual events, if any occurred at all. To approximate a time frame for actual events, the specific details of the information provided were examined. This examination was to determine if any military members were identified by name or by a combination of any other distinguishing characteristics such as rank, position, age, or physical attributes. If the testimony identified a military member as having been present for an event, then their personal record could be used to affix an approximate date. Affixing a date of an event by referencing personnel records was possible since each military member's personnel file contains a physical description and chronological listing of duty stations, units of assignment, and work assignments for his/her entire military career. This detailed examination revealed several likely references to specific individuals, which through their personnel files were documented as having been assigned to the hospital at Roswell Army Airfield or Walker Air Force Base. Roswell Army Airfield was renamed Walker Air Force Base in January 1948. The Big Red-Headed Colonel. An indication that Dennis might have mistaken the date of actual events was that he was quoted in at least one book as having said that the officer who threatened him in the hospital was a big red-headed colonel. Research revealed that only one tall colonel with red hair was known to have been assigned to the Walker Air Force Base Hospital. Colonel Lee F. Farrell was the hospital commander from October 1954 until June 1960. Farrell was 6 foot 1 inch tall and had red hair. Captain Slats Wilson. In at least 2 interviews, Dennis repeatedly made reference to a nurse named Captain Wilson. He recalled that Captain Wilson, who he believed was the head nurse, was another nurse stationed at the Roswell Army Airfield Hospital in July 1947. Dennis claims he spoke to Captain Wilson several times in reference to the alleged missing nurse. He claims that on the day after he met with the missing nurse at the Roswell Army Airfield Officers Club, he attempted to contact her by telephone at the hospital but was told that she wasn't on duty. Instead, he spoke with Captain Wilson. "I called the station I knew she, the missing nurse, always worked at," Dennis said. "She was a general nurse. I was informed that she wasn't working that day." Dennis then telephoned an old girl by the name of Wilson, Captain Wilson, and I asked her what happened. She said, "Glenn, I don't know what happened. She's not on duty." She said she tried to get word to her, the missing nurse, that you, Dennis, want to talk to her. Later in the